host the Ravens in a joint practice. The two teams will close out the preseason on Saturday at Lambeau Field. Turning to the Badgers, they're just 10 days out from the start of their season against Western Michigan. Yesterday, quarterback Ricardo Hallman named a second-team preseason All-American by the Associated Press. He led the Big Ten in interceptions last year. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
Matt, will either Cooper or Marshawn Lloyd be ready to do anything at all this week in practice?
Cooper will be there for Indy today. And then we have some jog through as well. Lloyd's still out.
Is Morgan ready to progress into that team?
We will see.
Would you like to get him?
I think he's going to mostly do Indy and jog through again today. And then we'll see about practice on Thursday. After watching the tape, I don't think I truly appreciated it. Our guys were playing hard. They were straining. We didn't execute all the time, and that's why we struggled. Our guys were definitely playing hard.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
That's Matt LaFleur from an hour and a half ago, less than 2 hours ago. Press conference earlier today. And if you're wondering, Grant, why have you tagged on this question and answer at the beginning of the intro? What's the point? It's nothing clever, nothing meant to be funny. It's just informational. Not everything's a bit. Sometimes we can just learn, right? Matt LaFleur giving us injury updates. Who's back at practice? Who's not? Edgerrin Cooper back. I guess we're calling individual drills indie drills now. It's kind of cool. I remember when we first started referring to special teams as teams. It's like, you guys came up with a clever way to say that. All right. So Marshawn Lloyd still out, but Edgerrin Cooper back doing individual drills, as is Jordan Morgan. Tyron Hopper's back in the fold after playing this last weekend. So some injury updates to begin the show, and Matt LaFleur backpedaling a little bit on his post-game comments. Not that it really matters. You lose 27-2. I don't care what you say at the podium. Like, you are going to call your guys out a little bit. That score's awful. The product was awful. The game was awful. And I guess Matt LaFleur, now that he's gone back to watch the film, it actually wasn't as bad. Our guys were playing. They just weren't very good, which is kind of right. Like, that's what we're left to assume. If they were playing hard and they were flying around and giving effort, as Matt LaFleur said, okay, well, then they're just not very good, which is reasonable considering they were a lot of 2s and 3s and 4s playing against Denver's 1s and 2s. It was a little bit of a mismatch, and that's fine. That's what preseason is about sometimes, but a little bit of an explanation and a clarification from Matt LaFleur about what he saw in Denver on Sunday night. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. I appreciate you listening, or maybe you're watching the live stream. We're up on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter. I got a text from Zach yesterday saying the title of the video on Twitter is wrong. And I look at it's wrong again today. The title of the stream says Brewers Split Series, Super Bowl Bubble. That was Thursday's show. And when Zach texted me that yesterday, I said, I'm a little bit new to streaming the show. I'll go find the issue. And I couldn't really make sense of why maybe that issue was happening. And then I checked our YouTube stream. Everything was fine there. Checked the Facebook stream. Everything was fine there. In fact, I went into the streaming software today and purged everything other than today's show. It's a Twitter issue, which is fine. Twitter has worked so well ever since Elon purchased it, and it's fine. It's not like it cost me money to stream. So if there's some kinks, it's not really a big deal. 608-321-1670 if you'd like to call or text the show. Would love to have you. And you can comment on the live streams. I'll do my best to watch, and you can text as well. David Gasper going to join us in hour number 2 around 5:30 to talk Brewers. They were off last night. I didn't quite know what to do with myself. We've been rewatching The Office, so I watched a couple episodes of that, went to bed early, and my God, I feel great today. So I feel great about my decision last night. I'll go back to, getting a headache and driving myself nuts watching my favorite baseball team tonight, as we do 162 times a year. Yesterday, speaking of the Brewers, had a couple comments from callers about how the Brewers need more attention. They need more credit. They should get more national love, right? Brewers should be getting more love, should be getting more shine. And sometimes we do this with the Brewers. We did it a lot with the Bucks for years. And this seems like so long ago. It's not, right? 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago at the most. I think of 2017, 2018, 2019, kind of that window as the Bucks were building it up with Giannis, kind of on the rise, right? Green and growing, as some might say, owning the future, that kind of thing. Remember when we used to keep track of how many national TV games the Bucks would get? Like when the schedule would come out. Oh, they got 4 national TV games this year. Or when when the Bucks would say play the Thunder on some random ESPN game on a Wednesday night and the Bucks looked really bad, we would all get bent out of shape on sports radio and on Twitter. Oh, we only get so many national televised games, and you go out and you lay an egg when you finally get a national audience. Like, remember when we used to care about that sort of thing as Bucks fans? We did. Don't deny that we did. We did. We cared a lot. And I'm just glad that we don't do that anymore. Like, think of how far we've come with the Bucks. We learned that the Bucks aren't going to play on Christmas this year. And I think most Bucks fans were like, all right, we're over it. We're past that. But it wasn't that long ago where we would say, oh, the Bucks need to get more national run. They need to get more national attention. So I'm very familiar with that with the Bucks from that era of Bucks basketball. But now, last night we got a couple calls. We want more national attention for the Brewers, right? And as I said yesterday, that's tough with baseball because there's not that much national attention to go around. Like Stephen A. Smith is not leading First Take with baseball. Cowherd's not talking baseball. So really when you say, well, we want the Brewers to get more national attention, we're talking about baseball podcasts, MLB Network, right? Stories been written in The Athletic, that kind of thing. It's national coverage, but it's a step below what we'd expect for our favorite NBA team or certainly for our favorite NFL team, right? National coverage in baseball, that's tough. But I've had my ear to the ground and my eyes on my Twitter feed, and I've bookmarked quite a few instances in the last 24 to 48 hours of individuals nationally giving the Brewers some credit. And I've prepared for us a little sampler here. We can listen to a couple bits of commentary. This is Ken Rosenthal on his podcast with The Athletic yesterday, giving the Brewers some love. Let's listen in, some national love.
But they've pieced together the rest of these guys, some of whom, many of whom, have kind of come out of nowhere. I'm talking about Jared Koenig, minor league deal last November. I'm talking about Brian Hudson. He was the guy DFA'd for Yoshinobu Yamamoto and then traded to the Brewers from the Dodgers. Trevor McGill was a minor trade with the Twins in April of 23. Joel Payams was part of the Esteury Ruiz heist that also brought the Brewers William Contreras. And Elvis Peguero, he came over in the Hunter Renfroe deal. That was in November of 2022. So they have built a bullpen. They have developed their bullpen on the fly, and they have built one of the best bullpens in the National League.
See, how great is that? Ken Rosenthal, one of the best. Some national love for Jared Koenig and for Joel Payams. And it's good that Elvis Peguero got a mention because he figures to play a big role for the Brewers down the stretch at the major league level. Another instance of national coverage. This is from Mark DeRosa. I labeled it MDR, and I'm looking at it like, what does that stand for again? This is my fault for preparing. I cut this sound this morning and saved it this morning. I'm like, MDR. Mark DeRosa on MLB Network. This is from yesterday, I believe.
They got a chance to have the #1 seed in the National League when we go into the postseason. Okay? That would change everything. And you couldn't name a starter outside of Freddie Peralta for him right now. William? Yes, exactly. William Contreras has been unbelievable for this team from start to finish. And Colin Ray kind of epitomizes what they're about. Yep. I've been focused on them Saturday and yesterday watching them. Not only Colin Ray, the lefties out of their bullpen. Mm-hmm. How about Mr. Brian Hudson? Filthy sweeper. How about Mr. Koenig coming in on Saturday and punching 3 tickets,
with
and
Jared
then Pat Murphy bringing him back in yesterday, and him getting his first save.
Yeah.
So it's all hands on deck there. Christian Yelich goes down. They just don't seem to want to waver. Listen, the division's been down.
Undaunted.
You got to be honest about it. But they're sitting there, hats off to them, with an 11-game lead, and now their entire focus has shifted from, are we going to the postseason, to, hey, let's run down the Phillies and the Dodgers and have them come to our yard.
Mark DeRosa, knower of ball. And how about that? Jared Koenig getting not just love on one national show, but 2. Ken Rosenthal and Mark DeRosa. How about a little bit more MLB Network? You want some national love for the Brewers? This is Kevin Millar unintentional talk on MLB Network. More national love for our boys in
We
Brew.
do have to take them in consideration. We do have to talk more about them because what they've done is sit here and take an 11-game lead in that division. And going into this year, now we talk about, because it's so fascinating, predictions in March and April, and we all think everybody's going to be healthy and all these teams are going to be good. And you look up right here, Brew Crew lose. They lose their manager. Pat Murphy steps in. Yes, he was the bench coach and all this stuff, but Willie Adames, unbelievable dude. 22 home runs, 80-plus, 85 ribbies. Wilson Contreras, listen, Cheerios has been gotten his run on it. Their bullpen's been unbelievable. They just find a way to do what they have to do that night, and they beat good teams. This isn't like, oh, well, the division's a little bit, it's all about, no, has nothing to do with that. We all have the same schedule. They just went in and the Guardians went in there and they got swept. That's a good ball club, right? If not the best record, best team, whatever you want to say. But there's no more of this, hey, yeah, the schedule or their division, because what the Brewers have done is win baseball games and taken names and winning series. And it doesn't matter. They go in there and do what, it's not one guy, it's a lot of the whole group. But I tell you what, Adames, his energy that he brings at that position and the power, and 85 ribbies is no joke. He's going to drive in three digits, like to say, that's 100 ribbies, okay? Sorry, Sarah. I was going to say 6 digits. That'd be a ton of RBIs. But they are a group, and Wilson Contreras, I can't say enough of them. He is behind that dish, leading that pitching staff, no matter what. It's the starters or the relievers. Yeah, William. Yeah, and Contreras, and it's been fun to watch. I'm truly. Rarely do you go in there and say remote stopper. When they got those unis on and the Brew Crew are back, they're remote stoppers.
So, I mean, the national love, it is coming, Brewers fans. It's taken a little bit. It's August 20th. But for a team without any expectations, we're starting to get some national love. And a player mentioned there that we hadn't heard in previous conversations, a guy who's going to get some Rookie of the Year love. We'll see how Paul Skeens is handled down the stretch. I know Rosenthal wrote a column at The Athletic yesterday about how the Pirates might be tempted to shut him down. We'll see. Jackson Chourio is going to be right up there, and it's nice to hear Kevin Millar mention Jackson Chourios and the work that he has done. And, Christian Yelich gets all the pub as the superstar for the Brewers. He's got the big contract. He's been there the longest, but it's nice to hear Wilson Contreras get some love as well. So just a sampling of some national love. Oh, and one more. I forgot about this one. I found this one right before the show. Ken Rosenthal on his podcast, Foul Territory? Fair Territory? One of them. They're all a little bit redundantly named. Here's Ken Rosenthal talking about the Brewers' starting pitching staff, particularly.
And then the rotation, this is another area where I thought they'd fall apart, but Peralta's been Peralta. Colin Ray's been great. Tobias Myers has come out of nowhere to be a really effective starter for them, and they've got Savali now and Montas.
I love how they have Savali and Montas. Those are two names of guys who are on the team. I thought that analysis of Freddie Peralta in the year that he's been having, I thought that was outstanding from
Peralta's
Ken.
been Peralta.
Peralta's been Peralta.
Peralta's been Peralta.
Sure. Totally has been the case, unless you look at the numbers or the performances or just watch with your eyes. Again, more national love for our crew. So I know a lot of you were begging for it, dying for it yesterday when we talked about the Brewers finally getting some attention on the national stage. And aren't we better for it? A couple comments on the Packers before we take our first break. The name of tonight's show, if you have seen the live stream, it's named correctly on Facebook and YouTube. Those two platforms are pretty well organized and run pretty well. The back end of those, the engineers do a pretty good job. Twitter is not so much, but that's fine. The title is Brewers Going National, LaFleur Learning. So I want to talk about LaFleur and maybe something that he's learned this week. I think back to 2019 and 2020, Matt LaFleur's first season or two as head coach of the Green Bay Packers. A lot of things that he did well, and a lot of things that he's still doing well. But I early on, just trying to put myself in that headspace of learning about Matt LaFleur as a coach for the first time. He engaged Aaron Rodgers early and often, kind of brought his career back to an elite place. It's not like Rodgers was on the doorstep of retirement, but he maybe found a late career resurgence in Aaron Rodgers that maybe we didn't expect to see. Maybe it was a Jordan Love pick. Maybe it was Matt LaFleur's offense that Rodgers found engaging, and who knows? It's probably a combination of both. But I remember in 2019 and 2020, one of my complaints about Matt LaFleur is that it seemingly took him a time or two to get something right. He would make a mistake, and it would cost the team a game. It would cost the team in a big way. They get blown out. They'd show up to a game not ready to play. And then we'd hear Matt LaFleur say, yeah, come to think of it, the way that we traveled last week, didn't really like that. Come to think of it, playing this guy at this spot didn't really make sense. Come to think of it, starting this guy instead of this guy, come to think of it, we would do that differently. It's like, hey, man, I get it. We all make mistakes, but every once in a while, you got to get something right the first time, even as a young head coach. Do you remember these conversations? If you're listening to the show years ago, maybe you remember this, and maybe even if you weren't listening to the show years ago, you think back and you're like, yeah, I remember thinking that about Matt LaFleur. Well, I have 2 comments from Matt LaFleur in his press conference earlier today. Okay. So Matt LaFleur said early last week, not going to play the starters. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday and maybe how that led certain guys on the roster to take their foot off the gas a little bit. It's like, well, we're going out to Denver and we're going to have some joint practices, but we don't got to play this weekend, so we can kind of, take it easy. We can kind of relax. So Matt LaFleur, first question and answer that I'd like to play for you. What are we going to do this week? Are we going to play starters against the Ravens in the preseason finale?
Have you made a decision on how you're going to treat this last preseason?
Steve McGargy with the question, I believe, the AP.
Have you made a decision on how you're going to treat this last preseason game in terms of whether you're going to play the starters or we treat it like
I think it's to be determined. I just want to see how this week's the week of practice goes, and then we'll determine it.
Different answer than he gave last week. I want to see how practice goes. To be determined. Okay. So I saw this tweet at the end of Bill's show. Nagler tweeted this out, Aaron Nagler, Cheesehead TV. And I replied to Nagler, and I'm like, hey, Nags, do you think if Matt LaFleur could go back last week and say it last week, instead of doing it the way that he did it, instead of saying, we're not going to play anyone, if he would have kept that possibility open, maybe that would have kept guys a little bit more engaged last week. Who knows? And Nagler replied, he said, Grant, that's actually a great. Jason Wilde asked that follow-up. I said, excellent. So here is Jason Wilde's follow-up and Matt LaFleur's answer.
Matt, when you say you're TBD on your plan for Saturday, is that in any way a lesson from the way you thought last week went when you told the guys that they weren't going to play and maybe you weren't all that happy with how the practices went, or are those not related?
Possibly. No, I think we're working through things, some different stuff from a scheduling perspective in terms of what are the alternatives if we don't play them, what are the benefits if you do play them. So I'm kind of working through that right now. We've had a lot of discussions internally, and like I said, to be determined.
When he said possibly, a little bit of a smirk on his face, which to me is NFL head coach press conference speak for, yeah. I want to keep these guys accountable a little bit. And if they have some awful practices this week, who knows? We might throw them in the game next weekend. I'd still bet that they probably won't. We'll see. There's different levels of starters, right? There's Christian Watson and there's Edgerrin Cooper. Edgerrin Cooper might be a starter for the Packers this year, but he's a rookie. So even though he's a starter, might be a guy who plays in the preseason game. I don't know how Matt LaFleur is going to approach this game. I don't think he'll throw really valuable guys in this game. But I think this week, maybe he learned a little bit of a lesson. I'm going to keep that possibility open just to keep these guys engaged as much as possible, which is something that we discussed yesterday. Interesting to hear Matt LaFleur, and I thought a really good job by Jason Wilde to ask that, because that's where my brain went immediately when he said to be determined. I said, a little bit different than last week. I wonder if that's why. And Matt LaFleur, without saying yes, basically communicated yes. 608-321-1670 if you'd like to call or text show if you want to talk Brewers, if you want to talk Packers. I have some larger big picture NFL stories I want to get to, some audio from both Tom Brady and from Tua that I think is really interesting. We'll react to that. And David Gasper, reviewing the Brew, will join us in hour number 2. A lot more of the Wisco Sports Show coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
They have just put it together, and their front office deserves credit. Murphy deserves credit. His staff deserves credit. And, of course, the players who always seem to have a certain edge about them. I don't know if it's an underdog thing or a small market thing, but there's a hunger there that defines the Brewers, and it kind of makes them who they are.
It's Ken Rosenthal, a part of the clip that I played you earlier. I cut a lot of audio of national baseball pundits talking about the Brewers over the last 12 hours or so. I got a lot. I got a whole library. And Ken there talking about the idea that I've brought up throughout the year, and an idea that Pete from Monona and I talked a little bit about last night. Pete's like, hey, man, a manager really doesn't mean that much. You really think Pat Murphy is leading them to 10 extra wins or 15 extra wins over expectation this year? I don't know about 15 or 20 wins. I don't know that he's single-handedly leading the Brewers to overachievement, but how can you look at this roster? How can you look at this team, especially the way that they play and the way that they carry themselves, and say anything but they're an extension of their manager? It's a big part of why they're winning, something that we've talked about a lot. And interesting to hear Ken say that in kind of different words. I like it when analysts in sports say what I'm saying or say what we're saying, but say it in their own way. Right. That's part of why sports talk is great. You can hear different perspectives and different approaches from lots of people. And that's not a way that I had heard it. A certain toughness, a certain small market edge that kind of makes them who they are and is a big part of their success. And I completely agree. If you want to talk Brewers, you want to talk Packers, we're discussing both. I will take your calls. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Hello, who's this?
Hey, buddy. Hey, Pete, stick to Ken and Barbie.
2 days in a row we're graced with a Dave from Monona. I figured I'm already regretting saying this, but I figured you would be going to Milwaukee to protest what's going on at Fiserv Forum tonight, Dave.
What's going on there?
A rally for the Democratic nominee for president.
Oh, I mean, that's, oh my gosh. Real quick, just go to Chicago if you need an abortion. They got a clinic outside their convention now, give them free abortions outside the convention, the Midway.
See, I said I already regretted it, and I was right.
You started it, but anyway.
Well, you didn't need to go an abortion joke. There's a million different routes that you could go to make fun of a liberal. I threw you a softball. You didn't need to hit it that way, but that's my fault.
Okay,
I said it's my fault. I would regret it, and I did. So whatever.
Well, I had to get in before you and Begabon and Judah would start comparing recipes on a baked bread and homemade jam. Oh my God! But as far as Matt LaFleur, 6 years, same BS after every mistake he makes, which is the same every year. Tired of hearing it. News reporters. He's a clown. He doesn't know what he's doing because he keeps doing the same mistake. It's just like, reporters are idiots for even asking the same question.
So, well, it's a preseason game though, Dave. You know, like,
but it's the same thing he does every year. Who cares? I mean, he should be playing the starters Saturday. No, all 22 starters should never be playing 2 weeks before a game.
Well, they're not going to play all 22, but he might play a couple, and I don't think you
shouldn't play any of them.
Okay,
that's what you got practice for.
All right. Jeez, fine. All right, none of them. All right, I thought we were going to meet halfway on that one. Continue.
No,
I cut you off. What's point number 2?
No, I know, but I keep hearing you guys talk about you got to have continuity. You got to have continuity. Well, you're not going to get continuity when you're playing 3 and out, 5 and out, 6 and out. You get your continuity when you're playing against the other team. 5-minute drive, 10-minute drive.
Okay.
You go the first 20 plays. That's where your continuity is, not on 3 and out and 6 and out and playing your starters.
All right.
I mean, come on, people. But finally, I mean, come on, Matt LaFleur. We've heard this song and dance. It's just like Jason Wilde and those guys keep asking the same question. You know the answer. That's what you got practice for. The games don't do nothing for you because you're 3 and out, 6 and out. Maybe a minute and a half drive.
Well, there are a couple guys like Edgerrin Cooper, for example. He hasn't been able to practice because he's been hurt. So if there's a chance that he could get some game reps this weekend, in a general sense, Dave, I agree with you, but there are exceptions to every single rule that you're talking about. Like, it might make sense for some guys to play. What's up?
Then he gets hurt again. If he's healthy, don't waste him on Saturday. If he's going to get hurt again, waste them on a game day.
All right.
These players are the best shape. We don't need to be playing anybody on Saturday. It's just that's what the scrimmage against Baltimore is supposed to be for, right?
The joint practices, sure.
You brought them in to scrimmage them, then do it Monday through Friday. But anyway, Vagabond, you get your church in Vagabond night and call and talk about breads and jams and law. Oh, by the way, my buddy who heard me say to you 2 years ago asked about your slow cooker lawn party. That's what we got to have, my friend. We got to get together and have a TDY slow cooker lawn party.
I would make food in my slow cooker, Dave, and I appreciate the call. I don't know why I brought up politics. I thought you'd make a joke that didn't include abortions. I figured we could find some political humor that both sides could laugh at. I don't know why you had to, whatever. You'd turn off the evangelical audience. By the way, a large audience of the show, so thank you. We're big. I checked the ratings. We're big with the evangelicals. I would make foods in my slow cooker that would blow you away, Dave. I know you'd have no problem eating it. So don't complain about how the sausage is made, because I know you'd eat the sausage. Don't make fun of slow cooker. Slow cooker, it's the grill of the wintertime. When men can't go outside to grill, we slow cook. That's what we do. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Brad, how you doing? It's Corey.
I'm doing great, Corey and Marshall. How are you?
Not too bad. Just heading back from the grocery shopping for the week. So I want to talk Brewers. It is good to hear that they're getting some national pub. I think I've been a pretty consistent caller this year. It's been kind of like I'm excited. So excited for the opportunity, but cognizant of the challenge is kind of what I want to say.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of where I'm still at. I know you and Bill talk a lot about it during his show during the day. And that's kind of where I'm still at, is that I think they've got a great opportunity for them here. They can get into the playoffs. And I'm still cognizant, though, of the things we've kind of discussed previously, offensive-wise, and you were touching on it last week when they were playing the Dodgers. That, like, the grinding of the offense, and you and I chatted about it, I think last week when I called it.
Yeah, when they're grinding, just to catch everyone up, because I can do it briefly, like, when they're grinding, they'll get a big hit, and it won't even feel that big because they got guys on, and they need to score, and it'll be a single that barely scores run one. Like, when they're grinding on offense, it just feels it's a lot of infield singles, contact plays, fielder's choice, and it makes me want to pull my hair out, Corey.
And I was talking to my buddy this weekend. We were driving up for the Metallica concert, and we were chatting about the Brewers. And when you get in the playoffs, the thing you got to remember is, like, okay, in the regular season, you can grind through a game kind of because the managers are going to leave their pitchers in, right? Like, the Dodgers are going to leave in pick whatever, Walker Buehler. They're going to leave him in 4 or 5 innings still, even if he's not doing that great, because it's the regular season, and as counsel used to say, there's 162 games, blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yep.
When you're in a shortened playoff series, I guess the cognizance of the challenge I still have with the Brewers is that, okay, you start popping little singles here and there, fine. They're going to yank that pitch out, and they're going to start rolling through their bullpen and start flamethrowing you with a playoff caliber bullpen. Will do that. So you're going to have to be able to score, like you said, and I agree with, bunches of runs at one time where, like, you get 2 guys on, they're still leaving them in, and all of a sudden you pop a 3-run homer.
Well, that's the thing. And we talked with Brett and Tosa about this, one of our bigger Brewers callers who goes to a lot of games. Like last year, they got runners on against the Diamondbacks. There was traffic. They're just lacking those big swings, a big 3-run homer here, a huge double to the wall there. Like, it's harder to nickel and dime your way to runs in the playoffs. I agree. And I think this team is better. The addition of Hoskins, I think, is a big one. And there's a chance that in the postseason, if he has 1 or 2 big swings, like that signing is worth it, right? Because you didn't have that guy last year. I think this team is better constructed to have those big swings and bigger moments in the postseason this year.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And then you could flip the script on that team. You could start rolling your bullpen out there and mowing them down, and they don't have the chance. So that's all I wanted to contribute for the week. Packers, they do have to play some stars. I'd say play them for a quarter, sit them down. You have to have these guys have to have some sort of actual real game practice. Scrimmage is a scrimmage. Scrimmage isn't real game time atmosphere. And then they have 2 weeks off until they go to Sao Paulo. So I want to see them get some actual game speed, game time experience, and let's roll.
And if nothing else, Corey, excellent call as always. I appreciate that. Very measured, a good follow, a good chaser to Dave from Monona. I think there are a couple guys, Edrin Cooper, if he's healthy enough to suit up and play. And Dave's like, well, if he's healthy, don't waste him in a preseason game. Yeah, but Dave, football players play football. So we can't just assume that they're going to get hurt the second they go out there. If you think that way, you're never going to get anywhere in the NFL. Someone like Edrin Cooper, who probably the Packers are hoping that he can be a starter at some point this year, if nothing else, needs to feel what it's like to get suited up, to travel, or I guess not travel to a game, but to run through the tunnel at Lambeau, to take the field in an NFL game, even a preseason game, because the reps, you can get those in practice. But the game environment and the feeling and the emotion you get from that, it's different. And Matt LaFleur's talked about that from the very beginning of the preseason. When he first told us, yeah, probably going to play some starters. We want these guys to get in the habit and get in the rhythm of playing in a game, getting ready for a game, preparing, running out of the tunnel for a game, all those things. So when you hit the field in week 1, like imagine you're Edrin Cooper and you miss most of your rookie training camp with a hip injury. You miss most of it. And then all of a sudden, hey, it's week 1. And you're playing in Sao Paulo, Brazil against the Eagles, who are good. They're talented. They should be a good team. We'll see. But like they're not playing the Little Sisters of the Poor in Brazil. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles on a primetime standalone game. You want that to be his first time taking the field? Now, if he's not healthy enough to play this weekend, it might have to be. That's the nature of the business. It's professional sports. It's tough. Like that might have to be his first game. But if the Packers could avoid it, they should try to avoid it. So no, they shouldn't just play all their starters this weekend to play all their starters, but there might be a couple of guys, Dave. And Dave, I do enjoy you as a caller because you're just insane and it's entertaining. It's good for the show. But I think deep down, Dave, you know that there's a couple guys who could play a little bit in a preseason game. It doesn't have to be a blanket decision. We're not playing any starters or we're playing all of our starters. We can find a middle ground that makes sense. 608-321-1670. Call or text the show. You can tweet me at Wisco Grant. Comment on the live stream. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. I have some bigger picture NFL topics that I want to hit. Comments from Tom Brady and comments from Tua. And we could talk about the big picture quarterbacking kind of environment in the NFL right now. And we could talk about the Vikings and the Bears and the line. Every team, especially in the division, doing things a little bit differently. So that's the conversation I want to get into next. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Appreciate you listening. Thank you for being here. I'm on Twitter at Wisco Grant. send me a text if you want to join the show, 608-321-1670. I'm going to put the calls on the back burner here for about 15 minutes. I have a couple really interesting pieces of sound, one from Tom Brady and one from Tua. I don't know that they're directly connected, but they both kind of speak to the current environment of quarterbacking in the NFL. Very different parts of quarterbacking in the NFL, very different approaches, very different situations, right? Tom Brady is now retired after a really, really long, successful career. Tua just got paid after, I'd say, an up and down beginning of his career with the Dolphins. Started down, more up recently than down, right? Seems to now be in a much better situation with a better coach and a better roster, right? So I want to play you these two comments. Let's just get into it. I'm not going to try to sit here and set it up. So Tua's been in the league 3 years and the statistics in year one versus now. I'm just going to play you this audio and we'll go from there. How does that sound? Well, let's not fart around. Let's not waste any time. Let's just play this comment from Tua and then we can react. Tua's on with Dan Le Batard and he was asked, describe the difference with playing for Brian Flores, his coach before, who's now the defensive coordinator of the Vikings. Describe the difference between playing for Brian Flores and playing for Mike McDaniel, your head coach now. And this is Tua.
To put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this right, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best fit for this. Like, you are accurate. You are the best whatever. You are this, you are that. Like, how would it make you feel listening to one or the other? You see what I'm saying? And then you hear it, regardless of what it is, the good or the bad. And you hear it more and more. You start to actually believe that. I don't care who you are. You could be the president of the United States. You have a terrible person that's telling you things that you don't want to hear or that you probably shouldn't be hearing, you're going to start to believe that about yourself. And so that's sort of like what ended up happening. And it was, I mean, it's basically been, 2 years of training that out of not just me, but, a couple of the guys as well that have been here since my rookie year all the way till now.
So there's a couple different ways to react to this. If I was very jaded and old school, old fashioned, or if I was someone like, I don't know, like Jason Whitlock or Clay Travis, or like I made my nut as a sports talker as someone who just took the unpopular stance all the time, or Skip Bayless, I could say something like, what happened to this sport? What happened to this country? I loved quarterbacks. They used to be able to take the criticism. They used to be able to be coached hard. And they didn't whine. They didn't complain. They got better. Right? They used it as motivation. Tua played for Nick Saban. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get the read that Tua is soft. In fact, like, he suffered 2 nasty concussions 2 years ago. A year, from an injury perspective at least, that probably would have scared some people out of the sport. There's probably a lot of athletes, if they had the type of year that Tua had 2 years ago, basically like getting concussed and having your body lock up on national television, needing to watch that and needing to see that happen more than once. I bet there are a lot of people, a lot of athletes in professional sports, if that happened to them, I'm out. I'm done. Right? I'm like Chris Borland. Chris Borland, to my knowledge, never experienced an injury like that. Certainly not multiple times during a game. He just got to the point where it's like, man, my body's beat up. I'm worried about my head. I'm worried about my neck. I'm going to retire, right? A lot of players would have gone through the year that Tua went through 2 years ago and thought long and hard about stepping away from football. Tua kept going, right? That tells me that Tua, on some level, despite his reputation of a guy who can't play in the cold and, not super big and strong, not the world's biggest arm, like, tells me on some level that he's tough. He played for Nick Saban at Alabama. So I have a hard time listening to these comments and putting it all on Tua. I can't listen to comments like that and think, I think Tua's being dramatic. I think Brian Flores was in a spot in his career. Remember, he came from Belichick. He was in a spot in his career where maybe he wasn't as mature. Maybe he wasn't ready to be a head coach, right? Maybe he was trying to cosplay Belichick a little bit. And maybe I watched Belichick coach Brady hard, so I'm going to coach Tua hard. And maybe he was saying things and doing things that he thought like, well, this is how it's supposed to be done. And I bet Brian Flores talked about it at his Vikings presser today. And it seems like Brian Flores on some levels, like, yeah, I wish I would have handled some things differently. I think Brian Flores was also under a lot of pressure because his team was awesome. His defense was awesome. He's trying to keep his head coaching job and not get fired. And he doesn't think his quarterback is very good. So he's taking it out on his quarterback. Not saying it's okay, right? Now it's football. Guys yell at each other, right? But it sounds like this went a little bit more than that. It's hard to succeed in that environment. I also think you could have a larger conversation about this, about offensive and defensive coaches. Mike Zimmer, who, funny enough, was head coach of the Vikings. Now Brian Flores, defensive coordinator of the Vikings. Mike Zimmer, I think towards the end, felt the walls closing in a little bit. His team wasn't winning. He probably felt like he wasn't going to keep his job. And I think he just started to blame the quarterback. It's like, well, I got this bum, Kirk Cousins, when Kevin O'Connell was pretty good with Kirk Cousins. I bet you dollars to donuts that now, not D'Amico Ryans, but I close my eyes, I can see his face. The new coach who came from the Rams, who's now at the Falcons, and I don't remember his name. Whatever, we can move along. D'Amico Ryans? I can't move along. It's going to bother me. You know who I'm talking about. They brought in the offensive coordinator from the Rams as well. I bet he's going to succeed. Couldn't really succeed, at least in the eyes of Mike Zimmer. Defensive-minded head coaches have a certain perspective about the way that a team is built and on the way that a team succeeds or fails, right? I think Brian Flores plays into that. Now you look at Mike McDaniel, right? Offensive guy. Kevin O'Connell, offensive guy. We've just seen a lot more examples in the NFL now that offensive-minded head coaches work better with quarterbacks, lead to more sustainable performance year to year to year. I don't want to say they're better because I think you can do it both ways. I just think it's a harder needle to thread winning with a defensive-minded head coach. And that's why I look twice at Jaden Daniels. I even look twice at Matt Eberflus, although I think Caleb is great, right? I look twice at especially Drake May. It's like, wait, so a project quarterback and a defensive-minded head coach, not just a defensive-minded head coach, but a defensive-minded head coach who's never been a head coach before, never been close to a head coach before, never even been a coordinator before. He was a linebackers coach who was promoted like 2 or 3 steps past where he was probably actually supposed to end up. And that's the scenario that Drake May is supposed to go into and succeed. You can win with defensive-minded head coaches. We've seen lots of teams do it. I just think if you're starting a team from scratch, there are exceptions. I think Seattle has a little bit of an exception culturally and personality-wise. All right, Mike McDaniel, I can see it making sense there, right? Pittsburgh, maybe, although, one could say, Pittsburgh's biggest problem is offense. Mike Tomlin can't get the offensive line right. And I don't think Kenny Pickett was great, but we certainly weren't going to see the best version of him with Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin. And now the Steelers are like, well, we'll spend a nickel to bring in Russell Wilson and we'll trade a bottom of the draft pick, a 6th rounder for Justin Fields. And you expect Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith. And I think Arthur Smith is a fine offensive coordinator, but it's different when it's the head coach, Listening to these comments from Tua was interesting. Let's take a break. Comments from Tom Brady about the current state of the quarterback position. Tom kind of sounds like an old man yelling at a cloud, but I think I agree with him. I really like these comments from Tom Brady, even though I think they're playing not so well with lots of people. He sounds a little bit like a bitter old man, but sometimes I love bitter old man. So let's listen to that. Comments from Tom Brady next. Remember David Gasper to join us in the final hour of the show. Back to your calls, your thoughts at 5 o'clock as well on the Brewers or the Packers or whatever. It's the Wisco Sports Show. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Appreciate you listening. David Gasper, about a half hour away, reviewing the brew. Always love talking with Gasper, our buddy. We'll try to get his beautiful face on the live stream as well. You can watch on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Get back to your calls and your texts as well at 5 o'clock, 608-321-1670. After we break at 5, we'll get an update from Zach Heilprin. Before we take that last break, listen to some comments from Tua where he spoke pretty honestly about his time with Brian Flores as a head coach. Did not sound like a good time. Basically sounded like Brian Flores was in his ear every day saying, you know, you're not good enough. You're not my guy. I don't believe that you can do it. And I think football players or just people in general, if you want to succeed in life, you're going to have to push through that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it would be really difficult to have your boss or your coach tell you every day, you stink. You're not good. I don't believe in you. You're not my guy. Yeah, that would be rough. I think you need to push through that a little bit. I don't know that you could push through everything that Brian Flores was allegedly throwing at Tua. I say allegedly because we don't know what he was throwing at Tua. It's not that I don't believe that it was difficult. I just don't know exactly what it was. On some level, you need to push through stuff like that. And I think Tua did to the best of his ability. He's in a much better situation now. A coach and a quarterback that I think embody that best. Brady ate a lot of crap from Belichick. Brady pushed through a lot, and I think that made Brady stronger. And a lot of people have talked about, you wouldn't believe what Brady put up with. You wouldn't believe the things that Belichick would say to Brady in meetings. He would coach him like anybody else. I think Brady was one of one in that department. Here's Tom Brady also talking about the quarterback play currently in the NFL. Sounds a little bit like an old man yelling at a cloud. But if I'm being honest, sometimes I like old man yells at cloud takes. Here's Brady.
There used to be college programs. Now there are college teams. You're no longer learning a program, you're learning a playbook. And the program is ultimately, like at Michigan, for me, that was a pro-style program. 5 years, I got to learn how to drop back pass, to read defenses, to read coverages, to be coached. I had to learn from being 7th quarterback on the depth chart to moving up to 3rd to ultimately being a starter. I had to learn all those things in college. That was development. Then I went to New England, and I was developed by Coach Belichick and the offensive staff there. I didn't start my first year. I think it's just a tragedy that we're forcing these rookies to play early. But the reality is the only reason why they are is because we dumbed the game down, which has allowed them to play. It used to be thought of at a higher level. We used to spend hours and hours in the offseason and training camp trying to be a little bit better than next year. But I think what happens is it discourages the coaches from going to deep levels because they realize the players don't have the opportunity to go to a deep level. So they're just going to teach them where they're at.
There's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that it's a tragedy that we're making rookies play, because look at what CJ Stroud did last year, right? He was great. I think Anthony Richardson, before he got hurt, it was fun. Maybe they were playing a dumbed down version of football. I can't tell the difference. I'm not Tom Brady. I don't know what high-level quarterbacking, diagnosing defenses, manipulating defenses, throwing guys open. A lot of that stuff is lost on fans. We don't notice that stuff, Tom. So I'm not saying Tom is wrong. I think if I were Tom Brady, I might feel similarly. I think there's financial motivation for teams to put rookies in and to start them right away because you have so much more money to spend on the rest of your team. So when you're starting a rookie quarterback, you have all this money. Let's go get Tyreek Hill. Let's get Jalen Waddle, right? Let's get A.J. Brown. And if Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are on my team, well, it's time to win. We don't have time and energy to waste developing this quarterback to play some highfalutin intellectual level of football. We need him to just be good enough to win because, my God, look at the team that he's on. So I think there's economic reasons. Is very, people would roll their eyes, but, it's kind of a capitalist thing. It's like if there's financial motivation to try to win with a rookie quarterback, then you kind of figure out the other parts, right? Finances and money leads a lot of what we do. And this is a sports version of that, right? But it's just so much easier to build a team around a rookie quarterback. Packers are an exception, right? And if the team around the rookie quarterback is good, well, we're not going to waste time developing the rookie. We want him to be as good as possible so we can try to win with this team before he gets expensive. Interesting comments from Tom Brady. From the comments that I saw, it wasn't received well. People thought he was an old man yelling at a cloud, but I kind of like that. 2 minutes, no commercials. We'll get an update from Zach Heilprin. Back after this.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Brewers will get a 6-game road trip going tonight in St. Louis. Milwaukee enters tonight with an 11-game lead on the Cardinals in the NL Central, the largest division lead for any team right now. Also has them sitting just a game back of Philly and LA for the top record in the National League. And they've done it despite injuries to major pieces, including Christian Yelich and a banged-up rotation. Manager Pat Murphy tried to explain how they've done it.
Because of guys like Yelich, they've built a culture in there that says, okay, let's win tonight somehow, whatever we got to do. This guy's not playing good, or this guy's not doing this, or this guy makes an error, or this guy doesn't pitch well. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep pecking away. Kind of like Colin Ray's done in his career. Let's just keep pecking away, make things special. So that's what I'm most proud of. Team that competes. We've been saying this since game 20. Teams in every game.
Again, the Brewers and Cardinals will face off tonight. Milwaukee will send Frankie Montas to the mound. He comes in 5-8 with a 4.86 ERA. St. Louis counters with Eric Fetty. He's 8-6 with a 3.40 ERA. First pitch slated for 6:45.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
When a company only does business in Wisconsin, that's Wisconsin Strong. Rural Mutual provides all lines of insurance, including commercial, farm, home, and auto. And your premiums stay right here to keep Wisconsin strong. Local agents, local underwriters, local claims adjusters.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Packers back in the field this afternoon. The second to last practice open to the public. The other will come Thursday when the Packers host the Ravens in a joint practice. The two teams will close out the preseason on Saturday at Lambeau Field. Turning to the Badgers, they're just 10 days out for the start of their season against Western Michigan. Yesterday, quarterback Ricardo Hallman named a second-team preseason All-American by the Associated Press. He led the Big Ten in interceptions last year. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heilprin.
Pat, will either Cooper or Marshawn Lloyd be ready to do anything at all this week in practice?
Cooper will be there for Indy today. And then we have some jog through as well. Lloyd's still out.
Is Morgan ready to progress into team?
We will see.
Would you like to get him?
I think he's going to mostly do Indy and jog through again today. And then we'll see about practice on Thursday. After watching the tape, I don't think I truly appreciated it. Our guys were playing hard. They were straining. We didn't execute all the time, and that's why we struggled. Our guys were definitely playing hard.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Little bit of an update from Matt LaFleur. It's just the injury update earlier today. Some guys back at practice, mostly doing individual drills. Matt LaFleur also said earlier today, we're going to leave it open-ended. Not going to say for sure whether or not we'll play starters or who will play, who won't play in the preseason finale this Saturday against Baltimore at Lambeau, Green Bay. Now, they have joint practices with the Ravens. And over the last couple of years, we've been told by coaches and people, it's like, well, actually, those joint practices can be in some ways just as valuable as preseason games, installing things and running certain sets. Now, they can't recreate a game atmosphere, but I think from an X's and O's coaching perspective, you can make a lot of hay in joint practices. I worry about a player like Edgerrin Cooper, who really has missed most of this camp, is a rookie, and is yet to play in anything close to a game. Right. So if he, for example, could play on Saturday, I would love for him to be able to experience that. I still think players like Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Jordan Morgan, guys who might start or guys who certainly will play a lot for the Packers this year, but they're rookies, right? I'll get those guys reps. They don't need a ton, but again, more exposure, being in an NFL stadium, being in front of the crowd, being under the lights, being on TV, getting ready for the game, running out through the tunnel, those sorts of things. Right? Preseason games have real value for those reasons in ways that joint practices just don't. And that's something that Matt LaFleur kind of has to balance and kind of has to figure out this week. Here, again, I played this earlier on in the show, but just to kind of reset things, Jason Wilde asking Matt LaFleur about his decision to kind of keep things open-ended relating to who he's going to play this weekend.
Matt, when you say you're TBD on your plan for Saturday, is that in any way a lesson from the way you thought last week went when you told the guys that they weren't going to play and maybe you weren't all that happy with how the practices went, or are those not related?
Possibly. No, I think we're working through things, some different stuff from a scheduling perspective in terms of what are the alternatives if we don't play them, what are the benefits if you do play them. So I'm kind of working through that right now. We've had a lot of discussions internally, and like I said, to be determined.
To be determined. I think it's a good approach. I don't think he's going to play many starters, if any. Maybe some of the young guys to get him reps. Edgerrin Cooper is one that comes to mind just because he hasn't played at all. If Marshawn Lloyd's able to come back this week, I wouldn't hold my breath. He'd be another guy. I think it'd be worthwhile to get him on the field, whether he's designated as a starter or not. Edgerrin Cooper might be at some point. I don't think Marshawn Lloyd at any point this year will be, just because of Josh Jacobs. And A.J. Dillon missed practice today with a stinger. I think I would put him on the depth chart above Marshawn Lloyd, and you'd have to put Emmanuel Wilson higher than Marshawn Lloyd as well. I think. Just being fair, Marshawn Lloyd hasn't been able to stay healthy, and when he has been healthy in camp, he hasn't looked good. And those two things are connected, right? It's hard to look good if you're not healthy and you're not out there getting reps. 608-321-1670. Going to take some calls, whether you want to talk Packers, you want to talk about those comments from Tom Brady or Tua, you want to talk Brewers, whatever. I'm all ears. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Old school.
Old school? Have we spoken before, old school? I feel like we have.
When you first got the job with WKTY, I talked to you a little bit.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And I haven't talked to you since. And then I didn't like you right away, but now I really like you. So I'm glad I stuck with you.
Yeah, you gave me a chance. Well, I appreciate that, old school. What's up?
Well, here's my question. You're from Menominee High School, right?
Yes.
So I started in the early 90s at Chippewa Falls High School, Chi High, and Labuda just came in to Menominee at that time. And I just could not believe how he turned that whole program around. And what we heard was, and I don't know if this is true, but he got everybody to eat, sleep, and crap football. Like he just turned the whole tide. So I'd like to know what your thoughts, since you went to that school and you knew him a little bit. So if you could tell me a little bit about him, and I'll listen. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, you'll hang up and listen. First of all, I didn't play football at Menominee. As much respect for Joe Labuda as anybody. That dude won 5 state titles. 2002 team was one of the best high school football teams ever. Like that man. Yeah. I'll give you an answer, and I can be brief enough because we got other callers, and I don't know that everybody cares about this. I remember in high school, I was a track and cross country guy. And one of my coaches, who was also a teacher at the school at the time, so a coworker of Joe Labuda at the time, basically, a fellow teacher and fellow coach, explained to me and the team, or parent, I don't remember what setting it was in, but basically talked about as a high school coach, you're not really competing against the coaches of the other teams in your conference. Like if I coach at Middleton, I'm not really competing against the coaches at Sun Prairie. Or to use another Big Rivers comparison, like if I'm the football coach at North, I'm not really competing against the coach for Hudson or Eau Claire Memorial. What you're really doing is competing against the other coaches in your own school for resources, for players, for focus, right? For attention, right? Because you need all of the kids or as many kids as possible to want to play your sport first and foremost. But then you also need those kids the rest of the year to, if not focus and specialize on your sport, to at least be thinking about your sport all the time, right? If it's not football season, if it's summer, are you going to come weightlift every day all summer long because you're thinking about football instead of going to do a million other things, right? Labuda was as good at that as any coach. The way that he would get kids into his program and get them to completely and totally buy in. And I don't know that Menominee, well, I do know. I don't think Menominee had any more talent than any other schools that they were beating up on for years with Coach Labuda. But everyone in that program was so bought in. The thought of not going to weightlift in the summer every day or in the winter after school, right? Like I had kids my age, like it wasn't even an option for them. They never understood it. Kids would get to school. I had friends who would get to school at like 5:15 just for the bragging rights of being there a half hour before 5:45, which was 15 minutes before you would actually go in to lift weights. You know what I mean? So that in high school, and I'll leave it at that. Like Labuda was as good. You go watch his scheme. His scheme was nothing like they were a power running football team. But the sheer number of people that bought into that program. And by the way, Menominee football, they don't play tackle football till 8th grade. It's not like they were wearing pads and helmets in elementary school and middle school, which, by the way, is the way I think you should do it. Like, kids shouldn't be hitting each other until they're almost in high school. 8th grade's fine. They split them heavyweights, lightweights. Safer, I think, too. Like, those kids don't need to be hitting each other until their bodies have matured and they actually know what they're doing with pads and a helmet. So that's a brief answer. He yelled at me once in the locker room because I was being too loud. It was a game day, and I was me and a buddy were changing. We were going to cross country practice. Came over. I don't remember what he said. It was like, "It's game day. You want me to go tell your coach?" And we're like, no. I think we were talking about we were going to play Minecraft after practice. We were getting hyped up for what we were going to build or whatever. He was scary. I interviewed him a time or two because I did some football broadcasts my senior year. Smart, really smart football coach. Kind of Belichick-ish in that he wasn't really long-winded unless you got him going. If something he was really interested in, then he'd give you a good nugget. But no, I didn't play football, but you will not find many people with a higher opinion of Joe Labuda and what he built than me. There you go. There's your very niche Menominee football talk. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? All right. Let's go to line one. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. It's Matt in Cross Plains.
Matt in Cross Plains. Do you want to talk high school football too, or do you want to talk about something else?
Oh, I mean, this Labuda guy sounds like the great coach that Mosinee High School had, Bob Coy. He coached football, Mosinee, to their only, I think, 3 state titles that they won on football back in the 70s, 80s. My brother played for him, and then he retired, and then he came out of retirement just in time to whoop our ass into shape when we were sophomores and on the varsity team. And,
You're from Mosinee originally?
Yeah, originally, yeah.
I didn't know that. You learn something new every day.
I grew up under the tutelage of one Bob Coy, who I believe is in the Wisconsin Football Coaching Hall of Fame.
We could ask Travis Wilson, but I don't think he's a big fan of our network for reasons, I guess. So
that's okay. So that's my high school football take there.
Nice.
You don't play against the other teams in your conference, really. You just play and try to get your team as many wins as possible, and you know who's going to be good and you know who's going to be bad. So
yeah,
for the most part, it's not like teams make some huge jumps from one year to the next for the most part in high school football, unless your coach has you buying into that program. That's for sure. But after that 1 year, I got out of football because it was, I wasn't good anyway. So
I never played football. I have nothing to add to this. So what did you call the talk Cubs? Your team released Hector Neris today.
Yeah, I know. What a shocker. They didn't want to pay some guy $9 million in an option.
When did his option vest?
They got rid of him. He had he had to finish 12 more games, so something like that. It was pretty close. So that was an obvious money saver.
Well,
move
and
by,
I saw
the
some
front
people,
office.
and I might have been guilty of this earlier because I didn't know he had a vested option. It is a little suspect for Craig Counsell to be using him as a closer only for the organization to DFA him. It seems like there's a disconnect there, but it seemed like they were just going to use him however they were going to use him with plans of getting rid of him before his option vested anyway. So this was financial, it seems.
Yeah, well, he was never supposed to be the closer, so they were screwed right from
What'd they pay for him? $9 million this year?
Yeah, he was a big eighth inning guy. It reminds me of the whole Troy Hawkins signing.
I mean, it's a hell of a bill for an eighth inning guy. I mean, it's a hell of a bill for a closer too, but
yeah, he had 3 good years in a row, so I guess that's you make your money. $9 million's not a lot, and
it's a ton. God, you Cubs fans. I listened to a Cubs podcast. There's no other callers on hold, so I actually want to talk about this. We're not in a rush. I was listening to a Cubs podcast not that long ago. No, it wasn't a Cubs podcast. It was Parkins and Spiegel. And I think it was Spiegel who was corrected by Parkins, who's now moved on. Whatever. He was like, well, they could trade Jameson Taillon. He's only set to make $18 million next year. That's not that much. Are you kidding me? $18 million? That's not that much. Your concept of economics in baseball, Cubs fans, you guys are sick. You know that, Matt?
That's right. And every Cub fan still complains that we don't spend enough money. So that's kind of ridiculous. And Adonasio's got that money. He just saves half of it for, buying a soccer.
Well, he doesn't have Ricketts money. He might have a little more money than he spends on the Brewers, but I don't think as much as a lot of people seem to believe.
Yeah, it's true. But, this year's Brewers team is coming together. Like I had said originally from the beginning of this year, I never, I expected the Cubs to play better and do better. But, I was always wary it would be between the Cubs and Brewers. But the Cubs, unfortunately, aren't holding that up. But, there's still some time left. So we'll still see what happens. I'm a diehard. So, if they go 11-0 for the rest of this month, that'll make my 20-6 August prediction, right?
And
and then we'll see what happens.
I do appreciate that.
Will happen, Grant.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, if the Brewers would only have, I don't think their pitching is going to do it for them when they make the playoffs. That's the only problem I see.
Oh, Matt, you are a quality caller and not necessarily a quantity caller. You don't call a ton. You call a good amount, but you don't call a ton. But I try to make the most of my time when I have you because you're a Cubs fan. When Bruce Levine reports, and he did this yesterday on Mully and Hall in Chicago, when he reports that the Cubs' number one offseason priority is signing Corbin Burnes, what do you have to say to that?
I say to that's a great number one priority. If all their current players play up to their ability, that's the problem. Everybody wants to sign this big impact bat, but who are you going to move or who are you going to trade? All I can see trading for or moving or signing a free agent would be at the catcher position. Amaya is good, but he's not having a great offensive year, obviously.
Is Amaya good?
Are
you sure about that?
The only thing he doesn't do is throw out runners. If he's hitting good, if he's hitting 250, 260, you can deal with him not throwing out runners.
But this is his first year in the majors, and he's not. Whatever. Continue. I don't know.
Yeah, anyway.
You guys got a lot of 6 or 7 hitters, and the Brewers have had good seasons with the lineup like that. But then you need 2 or 3 of those guys to have at least stretches where they're hitting like 2 or 3 hitters, right? You're probably not going to have any of those guys hit 40 bombs, although Domingo Santana did once upon a time, but. That's the Cubs issue, and Craig Counsell spoke to that. Like, I think they have a lot of guys that aren't meat of the order guys, and all of them are underperforming. And it's really difficult to score enough runs to win like that, even when your pitching is good. And the Cubs have had good pitching.
Yeah, the bullpen has turned it around, minus Maris technically, but he had some good outings. But you can't. Who are you going to get rid of? That's all I'll say to Cubs fans out there. Who are you going to get rid of? You're going to trade Ian Happ. You're going to get rid of Suzuki, make him a full-time DH. Bellinger, he's probably sticking around with his options.
He's gonna pick that one up.
You got Horner and Swanson, they're a tag team duo. They both are underperforming this year compared to last year, and then you got Perez at third base. I don't know. We'll see what happens. That's all I can say. There's not much you can do unfortunately, when you don't hit, and Council's been keen to that, and the Brewers, they hit.
Yeah, well, and Craig Council's
not every time.
Craig Council's found ways after every game to basically talk about how they're not hitting. Matt, I enjoy our chats. Thank you for hanging around and hitting some Cubs topics with me. Matt's a big baseball guy. I like talking to him, but I don't even fault Craig Council for his press conferences. I'll actually defend him. Like, what do we want him to say? Now, he could do a little bit of a better job paying lip service to fans. Of course. Be a little bit more engaging. It seems when he gives his answers that he doesn't care. I'm the smartest. We're the smartest. Fans' concerns, you're being irrational, right? And I don't like telling fans that their feelings don't count. I don't like organizations or individuals who cover organizations telling fans are dumb. Fans don't know. I don't like that. So Council could be a little bit more empathetic in how he speaks to fans and speaks to the Cubs general populace, but he's not wrong. Their lineup is a bunch of 6 or 7 hole hitters, all performing like 6 or 7 hole hitters. Like the Brewers have had years, and we could go back to 2017. I'd like to go back and look at the 2017 lineup, and maybe I will over this break. That year, I would reckon most of their lineup was 6 or 7 hole guys on a good team. If you were building a team with any sort of respectable budget, you would search for guys like that from that year's lineup to fill your 6 or 7 holes. But then you need to count on a couple of those guys to overperform, right? And maybe not start to finish for the season, but you need Jesus Aguilar to do what he did in the beginning of 2018, or you need Eric Thames to do what he did, for an April-May stretch. And the Cubs just haven't had that. Right? They have guys performing below the back of their baseball card. And that's really difficult because they don't have a Juan Soto in the middle of their lineup. They don't have what the Brewers had in a healthy Christian Yelich or William Contreras in the middle of their lineup. Again, that's probably enough Cubs talk. That segment brought to you by Menominee Football and the Chicago Cubs. Some of you probably loved it. Others are probably dying for us to go to break. So let's do that. We'll get to some more calls next. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
The Wisco Sports Show. David Gasper reviewing the Brews, set to join us in about 10 or 12 minutes. Talk Brewers. Brewers getting a lot of national love the last 24 hours or so. Sweeping the Indians. Don't cancel me. Kamala Harris, the Democrats at Pfizer Forum. We're not on in Milwaukee. Thank goodness. I'd be in trouble. The Guardians. Sweeping the Guardians. And moving to 11 up in their division. And I think everyone over the last 24 hours kind of took inventory and said, so the NL Central's over. The Brewers are 20 games over 500, and they just swept the Guardians, who've been one of the better teams in the American League this year. Let's stop and give credit to pitching staff, offense, Pat Murphy. Let's appreciate how many players they've lost and their manager before the year, right? So a lot of national love. We'll get some local love. David Gasper, who's credentialed in covering a lot of these games for reviewing the Brew. Let's take some calls first. Got a little bit of time before we get there. If anyone wants to talk Menominee football or Hector Neris's vested option, those are the two hot button issues that we've been on since 5 o'clock. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant. Hey, I could talk a little Texas high school
Hey,
football.
well, it's different down there. Everything's bigger in Texas, Tony.
Yeah, I swear they have some high school stadiums as big as Camp Randall. But, you're going down this Brewers coaching staff. You know what? I bet most of the Brewer fans don't even know who their pitching coach is. Whoever that guy is, Chris Hook, give that guy a raise.
I can get behind that. I don't know. I mean, especially with Colin Ray is, I think, the best example. The way that he has evolved and added pitches, and we're going to throw a couple more of these a game. We're going to throw these to this spot. The way that he has been molded and taken coaching, I think Colin Ray is probably the best example of the work that Chris Hook has done.
Yeah, and don't forget our guy Wade Miley the last couple of years before he got injured. I mean, there's been a lot of reclamation projects.
Tobias Myers? Tobias Myers. People think Tobias Myers is like this touted minor leaguer. He's bounced around. He's a journeyman. He wasn't expected to be anything.
And you know who I'm liking? And I always kind of liked him, and he's not had the best year going into this into the Brewers, but Aaron Savali looks pretty solid, man. So hey, shout out Chris Hook. I was looking at the Brewer pitching staff or Brewers coaching staff. There's a run prevention coordinator. I swear to God, if you look at their staff, run prevention coordinator. Couldn't you do that? You and I, couldn't we figure that out?
Well, I mean, I think he's on some level is just another pitching coach, right? It's like in the NFL. If you're the passing game coordinator, you're a mini offensive coordinator, right? I could not do that. Well, what are you driving at? You're saying that's a fake made up job?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a fake made-up job. Hey, lastly, Packers. I'm going to talk like Q, talking about a Bucks regular season loss to the Celtics. This game meant nothing. It didn't mean anything. They're playing third stringers against the first. Yeah, you want to put out an effort. You feel bad for the people that actually laid out money to go watch that game. I don't know why you would, but some people that place looked filled up. So I want to do a little pie chart with you. Okay. David Bakhtiari, free agency. If he's healthy, I got 3 teams. I think any LA team, Jets or Packers. Give me a little pie chart on David Bakhtiari.
Chargers, Rams,
Pack, Jets.
Interesting. So let me think about this, Tony. I'm going to do the classic. You're going to hang up and listen on this one. If the Jets suffer an injury at tackle, I could see it. Or if the Packers suffer an injury, I think there's a chance that David Bakhtiari might just hang out and a team will wait for an injury. There's a chance that happens. And that might be best for David Bakhtiari, too, because then he'll step into a situation where he's needed, where he has a role, and that makes most sense for him. If I were in charge of the Chargers, I'm staying far and wide. I'm keeping a wide berth from former Packers offensive linemen. Think of how many they've brought in and paid big money, and none of them have gone well, right? Bulaga, Lindsley, all those guys have gone out there and they're like, all right, we're going to bring in this Packers veteran. They're going to shore up our offensive line where we've been having problems. And it's never panned out for them. So I know they got a new GM and a new head coach, but I would say Jets, maybe Packers. Like if Zach Tom gets hurt, I could see it. It might make sense. Might. I'd bet against it. So I guess 80% likelihood would be Jets, and then the rest of the percent of the pie chart would be scattered throughout the rest of the teams, Tony. 608-321-1670. One more call, then we'll take our break. Get to David Gasper. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Eric on I-90. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Grant?
Good. I'm excellent. I'm excellent tonight.
Awesome. I'm going to be off topic here just a little bit.
No.
Well, it's sports. I was watching some Caitlin Clark highlights the other night, and this she looks really good. The whole team looks really, really good. Have you watched any of it?
I have not, but that's not because I don't like it. I've watched Caitlin Clark a handful of times. When the Fever have played the Sky, Angel Reese's team, I've watched that. I've watched probably 3 or 4 games of Caitlin Clark as a pro, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot, Eric, but I think that's about probably the same amount that most average fans have watched. She's fun to watch. She's unbelievable. And you know what I like about her, Eric, is when Diana Taurasi's talking smack or someone's talking smack, like she is aggressive. Like she will give it back.
Yeah.
I like that.
Great. I think we got some really good basketball. My Mrs. I-90 watches it, and I've been watching it, but we've been rewatching Better Call Saul, and that's
Great
better
show.
than women's basketball. But
Great show.
anyways, no, it's some good basketball. So if you get a chance, watch it. That's it, bud.
That's all right. All right. I was going to say, if you had one more thing, that's Eric on I-90. Caitlin Clark is good. I appreciate that. I appreciate that take from Eric. I'm going to watch the Brewers, and if there's NFL on this time of year, I'll watch that. And if not, right now I'm rewatching The Office because I haven't seen it in forever, or I'll go outside. I'm not someone who's like, there's no sports on tonight. If one of my teams aren't playing, I'll find something to do. All right. Eric was a little more brief than I thought. So one more call, then we'll get to Gasper. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Great. That was a really functional segment. I wish we could rewind and do that one again, but that's fine. We'll take our break now. David Gasper will join us next, reviewing the Brew. We'll talk Brewers with Gasper next. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
That's what this whole thing's about. Like when you're thinking of a small market team, you're thinking of guys that have all been thrown away, all guys that have been said, no, you're not good enough. And that's pleasurable to see, these guys then find an identity and find a way to be successful. And it's a beautiful thing. Well, what else can you ask for? It's special. They know who they are. They know where they came from, and they're just there to do their job as a teammate. They'll do anything you ask in any role. And, yeah, that's what makes it feel really, really special. Makes you want to come to the ballpark every day when you have like that.
It's Pat Murphy on Sunday. I played you a comment from Ken Rosenthal earlier in the show. Ken was like, I don't know if it's a small market thing, an underdog thing, but they just have an edge. They have an attitude, seemingly part of what makes them successful. And I think Brewers fans, we've been trying to nail down that idea all season. Like Pat Murphy has this, dare I say, aura. Right? He's got this energy about him that seemingly the team takes on, and it helps him win. And I think that's a rare thing in baseball where a manager fits with the personality of his team, maybe fits with the personality of his market and his city and the budget. And it's all coming together for this Brewers team, and they're really overperforming. Here to discuss it now with us, David Gasper, reviewing the Brew. David, can you hear me okay? You look excellent.
I can hear you just fine, man.
Oh, hold on. I have to unmute you. Say that one more time.
Okay, now I can hear you just fine.
Yes.
Glad you can hear me now. That's the important part of this too.
This is excellent. Do you buy into that? I think Tim Allen, who you're familiar with, does the baseball postgame show. I've heard him this summer a couple times use the phrase bumper sticker stuff, T-shirt stuff, right? Things that probably the analytics, the baseball sharps would dismiss. There's got to be something to be said for Murphy's personality, the way that the vision that he's got for this team, I've heard a lot of people in the national media kind of hint at that over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, his personality and his leadership style, it definitely fits this team, and this team kind of, that they've kind of taken on that same kind of identity, that kind of scrappy style, and just kind of lighthearted, still having fun, but still going about their business and getting things done and winning tonight. That's their motto. You find it everywhere down there. Win tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what has helped make Murphy so successful in this role, make this team so successful. Despite all these guys, kind of being, as Rosenthal was talking about earlier, just kind of cast-offs from elsewhere. Jared Koenig, Colin Ray, Brian Hudson, guys like that have just kind of stepped up into these kinds of roles, and the coaching staff helping maximize their talent and getting them to peak performance. And Murphy he's been a big part of that, and that's why he's continuing to prove he was the right man for the job.
So I love hearing that certain guys are getting credit. Earlier on in the show, I had a little bit of a montage of clips from National Baseball Talkers kind of shouting out members of the Brewers that have led this team to success. Wilson Contreras was one, Joel Payamps, Jared Koenig, another, Elvis Paguero. I'm joking, of course, because these are names that are being talked about nationally for the first time, and it's fine. It's Milwaukee and it's baseball. In all seriousness, this bullpen, Gasper, don't look now, but this bullpen might be almost to the point where you look at this: Williams, McGill when he's back, Hudson, Payamps now looks awesome. I don't know what we can expect from. I mean, what the heck's even the guy's name? The guy they acquired. Why can't I remember it?
Nick Mears.
Yeah, like that's a real bullpen. That's a real bull. There's no Josh Hader in that bullpen, but that's maybe 2018 light. That's a bullpen. You can get into the playoffs with that bullpen and do some real damage if your offense can get timely hits.
Yeah, you got McGill getting activated today. Paguero getting optioned down. So that was kind of a big thing there for the bullpen. Yeah, so long, Elvis Paguero.
Elvis has left the
15 of 24 inherited runners being allowed to score. Yeah, I mean the bullpen, it is legit. That group, the depth that they have now that they finally have guys coming back. We'll see what happens when Hobie Milner comes back as well. You've got a lot of really good, trustworthy options down there, and you've got some other really talented guys down in the minors that you can't even find room for yet. I mean, Craig Yoho's a guy who's coming up, and he could end up making a debut this season. Jacob Mizorowski could end up coming up and pitching out of the bullpen later this year. We'll see what happens when the roster expands a little bit in September. But I mean, just the talent, the group that they have back there, how they've got them performing, and getting Williams back too, where he doesn't have the wear and tear on his arm that some of these other guys do, because he missed the first couple of months of the season. So you get him, into September, October, you see a lot of relievers start to kind of wear down because they've been used so much throughout the year. Devin Williams doesn't have that. He doesn't have that kind of mileage on his arm this year, so he should be feeling fresh and in midseason form in September and October, instead of feeling like he's emptying the tank.
So, and you mentioned Yoho and Mizorowski. You've written a lot and talked a lot about both of those guys. We got a comment here on the live stream, says, get Gasper to talk about Craig Yoho. So
I saw that. So that's why I made a point to mention Yoho.
Talk specifically about him, and if there are Brewers fans that maybe heard that name but don't know much about him, tell us more.
Dude, imagine Devin Williams, like the second version of Devin Williams coming up. The changeup here is absolutely ridiculous in terms of the movement, the spin on it with Yoho's changeup. It's not necessarily maybe a blow you away fastball, but the changeup, it is so insanely good. And he's got 4 pitches too. I mean, the changeup is his best one, but I mean he has just been dominating everybody throughout the minors. I mean the strikeout rates. He's only given up I think single digit runs all season. It is a tiny ERA. Like it is, I think almost, below 1 on the season or somewhere around there. It's been fantastic. So, I mean, his type of stuff, I mean, it could play in the bullpen right now. There's not much room in that Brewers bullpen. There's only so many spots, and they've got a lot of guys. that they can go to and trust right now with that group. But when rosters expand, it's going to be hard not to give him a 40-man roster spot and bring him up for that bullpen. I think even more so than Jacob Mizorowski. I love Jacob Mizorowski. I think he's going to be a really great pitcher for the Brewers. And he could also pitch out of that bullpen right now. But if I have to pick between the two of them, I'm taking Yoho right now.
Well, Yoko can come up and just blow guys away and do so like one inning at a time. They don't necessarily need a guy.
Mizorowski would be the same kind of thing, just kind of a one inning deal for him. Maybe you could go two, but it would just kind of be one inning stints for Mizorowski most likely if the Brewers call him up.
And Yoho's a converted position player, right? Like it's a name that I've seen all year long, but I've only really started to learn more about his story and his background recently. He hasn't been pitching that long, right?
Yeah, he converted back in college. He was dealing with some injuries in his college career. That's why the Brewers were able to get him in the 8th round in last year's draft as like a 5th-year senior and sign him for like $10,000. And he's just got such incredibly good stuff. And yeah, he doesn't have that kind of mileage on his arm, so that's really kind of I think helped him, and especially with the Brewers pitching development staff, what they've been able to do and help him play up and play to his strengths. It's worked for him this year, and they're seeing incredible results from it.
So David Gasper reviewing the Brewers here. How Blake Perkins is getting healthier. It sounds like he could be back later this week. Okay. Yep. If we're now thinking about this team going into the postseason, I really struggle to think of an outfield of a 20-year-old Jackson Chourio, who's been great, but he's 20. The other two spots are Garrett Mitchell and Sal Frelick at this moment in time. You're just not getting a ton from those two spots, and they've been winning. Like they just swept the Guardians, and I don't know that they really got anything from two of their outfield spots. I don't know that they got much from Joey Ortiz. Like it's amazing that they win with lots of guys all over the place who really haven't been performing lately. What do we do at the outfield? What do you think Pat Murphy envisions moving forward for Mitchell and for Frelick, especially now as Perkins is on the mend?
Yeah, I think when Perkins comes back, you're going to see those guys kind of, trade off, maybe do a 3-man weave for those other two outfield spots with Chourio playing every single day. I mean, Murphy absolutely loves Perkins and just what he's done. And, he categorizes him as unsung, one of the unsung players on this team. He really likes that word. We had a fun debate on that pregame on if that actually is a word or not, but it was, yeah, but it's perfectly fitting for Blake Perkins. Just, he's their best defender out there in the outfield. In the eyes of Pat Murphy, he's the best defender of that group. So we're going to see him get quite a bit of playing time, I think, down the stretch here. And we've seen him do some things with the bat. I think Mitchell and Frelick certainly have higher ceilings offensively, but as you've kind of mentioned, we haven't really been seeing the results of those high ceilings. Frelick, there's just not enough power there, and to be hitting 255, 260 with no pop is a little bit different than hitting 300 with no pop. If you're going to be hitting that 255, 260 range, you got to be adding a little bit of pop. You got to be adding something there, but he hasn't been. And Mitchell has been really kind of up and down. He had that massive cold stretch there to start off that last homestand, where he was like 0 for 21 with like 14 strikeouts. Like it was some sort of like absurd number of strikeouts there for him. And he was getting a couple of hits there towards the end of it, and maybe getting getting off the schneid a little bit.
Getting picked off or thrown out, trying to steal second too.
Yeah. Especially with how fast he is. I'm surprised how often he's gotten thrown out trying to steal second base. But still, with Mitchell, I think we've seen glimpses of it a little bit, more often, and maybe it's just, kind of coming out of a cold stretch here. Maybe we can see more. But yeah, I mean, getting Perkins back is going to be huge for the depth of this group. I think it, certainly spells concern for Tyler Black's position on this roster because once Perkins comes back, I'm guessing Tyler Black ends up going back down just in order to make the roster math work. But another potential option too here, if they still don't get much production out of Mitchell and Frelick, is Brewer Hicklin. They put him on the 40-man roster down in AAA before right around the All-Star break, they put him on because he had like an opt-out in his minor league deal. And instead of the Brewers letting him, go elsewhere, they decided to put him on their 40-man roster to protect him and keep him in the organization because he's putting up ridiculously good numbers down in AAA Nashville, hitting for average and power down there. So maybe, if they still can't get much out of Mitchell and Frelick, maybe Brewer Hicklin is a guy that they turn to see if they can get some sort of spark going in the outfield because Christian Yelich isn't going to be coming back.
Yeah, they if Yelich was possibly coming back, that changes the math of how many outfielders, especially now with a healthy Perkins, because then you have 5 outfielders for 3 spots, but you can use the DH for Yelich. That's different than if Yelich is completely and totally out of the equation, which he is now. Do you have any parting shots on Yelich? We haven't talked since his season has ended. So do you have anything you want to say about that? Anything that you've written, conversations that you had, anything worth mentioning before I let you go?
Yeah, I mean, for Yelich to make this decision now, I mean, clearly the rest in rehab wasn't working. So, by getting to this surgery, by all accounts, everything that they've said, it was a successful surgery. But, just getting it done now, it gives them a much, that they expect them to be 100% ready to go for spring training next year. I think just kind of getting that earlier timeline helps them be more closer to 100%, still with some time in the offseason to kind of build back up.
They must have had a couple weeks to play with. They must have sat down and said, okay, well, we can wait a couple of weeks. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah,
and then
we'll
if it
give it a couple of weeks to rest in
able
rehab. And the rest in rehab was not getting better. So it's like, all right, let's just make the decision and get the surgery done and get it over with. And, hopefully it'll resolve those issues that he's had.
Anything at Reviewing the Brew that we can look forward to? Rosters are about to expand. This is you're ready.
Yeah.
To this, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely have some stuff on, potential, roster expansion ideas in the coming days here, because we're about 10 days away from that happening. So we got that coming up. We got a piece just put up now on the Trevor McGill move, getting him activated. So yeah, that's been up, and we'll continue to look at, different ways of analyzing this team and getting them ready for the postseason, because man, I tell you what, they are sitting in a good spot, but this race for the bye for one of those top 2 seeds in the National League, that is going to be incredibly close down the stretch. And I think that's going to be what sustains this team through the end of the year, because we've seen the last couple of years when they chase for a division title and they're out to an 8, 9, 10 game lead in the division, they struggle to close it. And then, they just kind of rest on their laurels for the final week of the regular season, and they go into the playoffs cold. But this year, with having that battle for the number 2 playoff seed, I think that's something that's pushing them. And, winning the division may just be an afterthought almost at this point. And, they're not going to be able to rest that final week because they're still fighting for something.
Even if they don't catch the first or the second seed, the fact that it's in play and they get to chase it, I completely and totally agree with you. And my mind went to the same place. That will keep them engaged. And I think this is a team, maybe even more so than the last couple of years, this is a team you want to keep engaged. They're younger, right? I don't think they're full of vets that are going to burn themselves out.
And that's what Murph has talked about, quite a bit too. Like, when you get into blowout situations, like they had in Atlanta where you're up by a ton, like you're trying to keep them engaged. And it may be a little bit easier to kind of check out when you got some blowout situations instead of a close game. But, just focusing on keeping the players, keeping the team engaged in the game, that's been something that Murphy has recognized. And he's talked about, too, the importance of getting that, getting one of those top 2 seeds. So he's going to keep them focused on that. And he's not going to let them just kind of rest there and, take it easy that final week just because they've got the division wrapped up. They're going to be chasing that. And, it wasn't in play last year, but it's definitely in play this year. And that's absolutely remarkable, and just kind of another feather in the cap for Pat Murphy to get this team to that point.
To even be in the conversation is really impressive. I kept you long, David. I appreciate you so much. Your work at Reviewing the Brew. Appreciative of your time and your effort. I hope to see you at the ballpark soon. Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Oh, it's appreciated, man. Take care.
Take care. David Gasper, Reviewing the Brew. You can follow his work. He's on Twitter at dgasper24. appreciative of his time. I was going to let him go like 4 or 5 minutes ago, but then, those couple things we kept going. I hadn't considered that. I hadn't considered the idea of the number 1 and number 2 seed being in play. The fact that this team is going to have that carrot to chase for the next month, because the division it's done with. Like, the Cardinals could sweep the Brewers starting tonight, and they're still back 8 games. You know what I mean? The division is done. I know it's not mathematically done, but for the purposes of how we talk about and follow and watch and think about this team, it's done. We're on to the next thing. The fact that they're right there for the 1 and the 2 seed, that keeps this team locked in. They have something to chase. And even if they don't catch it, if they have something to chase and something to play for down to the very final day of the season, even if the division is far in the rearview mirror, I think that puts them in the best possible position going into the playoffs. And that's something that maybe they've lacked the last couple of years. 608-321-1670. Time for a call or two when we wrap up the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. Wisco in 30 seconds.
Final segment, Wisco Sports Show. So appreciative of David Gasper. Very generous with his time and his work at reviewing the Brewers. Excellent. Follow him on Twitter. Always in the clubhouse press box covering the game. Vagabond John has been patiently waiting on hold. I, for one, am just fascinated to hear what he has to say. 608-321-1670. Vagabond, welcome.
Grant, this show has been all over.
Yeah.
And it's been between talking about Menominee, talking about Brewers, talking
Caitlin Clark.
Common theme through it all was programs, and we've been all over the place. And I'm going to add a little bit here in the last minute as we end. But Tom Brady talking about what's dying in college football is programs, and that's impacting the NFL, it's impacting the game. We're talking about how awesome it is to have a Brewers bullpen with a program that brings guys out of nowhere, revives their career. Talking about Menominee football, and hell, I could add Hurley football, who haven't missed the playoffs since 1994. And the thing that I find ironic on Badger Twitter right now is just straw man. We're going even further outside the lines of today's show. A lot of people out there, they're excited for something new, but now all of a sudden we're in that nostalgic phase. We are looking back. Wow, look at Wisconsin at the top of all of these lists over the last 10 years. Bowl wins, total wins, Big Ten winning percentage, all these things. And I'm nervous, Grant. I'm nervous that we threw away the program. Luke Fickell, could he be the real deal? Is he another Scott Frost? We have no idea. But today it got me thinking about programs and how awesome it's been to watch Badger football, Badger basketball, and the programs that they have become. And I'm excited to see what's next because I have no idea. That's all I got.
So that's excellent commentary, kind of tying the whole show together. Way to put a bow on the show, Vagabond John. I don't know what Paul Christ's Badgers would look like right now, or Jim Leonard's Badgers. I think the Badgers are going to win 7 games. I think 8 wins would be an excellent season. 9 would be cause for massive celebration. I don't know that Paul Chryst or Jim Leonard or a Badgers coach of old, I don't know that they're doing much better. Probably not the answer, probably not the addition, right? The elaboration that Vagabond John was looking for. I just think college football is changing. And I think Luke Fickell, right now, for a program and for a market like Wisconsin and a state like Wisconsin, and a conference like the Big Ten that's grown, I think Luke Fickell is just about as good as ever. But I thought that about Scott Frost to Vagabond Johnson. We'll have to wait. We're getting close. All right. Have an awesome night. Enjoy the program.